Okay, folks, welcome, good evening. It is Monday, February 5th, 2018. It is on about 6:30 p.m. in our council chambers. I'd like to call this meeting of Creighton Council to order. The 2.1, moved by Councillor Chapman, second by our Deputy Mayor. The council amendment, February 5th, 2018 council agenda to add a bylaw authorizing the appointment of a representative on behalf of the municipality pursuant to the Conservation Authorities Act under section 13.3. Any explanation on this? Where did this come from? Go ahead, Councillor Chapman.
It's in our package tonight, and it's in addition to Trent Hills on the north boundary, and we need, just because it is a special meeting, we need to be appointed again, if council so chooses, that both John Martinello has board members, we can represent the conservation for that.
Very good. I'm aware that it's there. I just wanted to verbalize for the recording. Anyone else? Any comments? See nothing further? All in favor? Carried. So we'll now look for the declaration of pecuniary interest, the general nature thereof. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if council would have a flavor to defer 19.1, which is our in-camera section. It's the investigation report. I've only received mine this evening, and it is a 60-page report. I would like an opportunity to read it before we bring it to council. So I'm moving that we defer 19.1 to February 19th.
Okay. I'll second that. Okay.
It is because of Family Day. It's outside. Right.
So moved by Councillor Ostrander, second by Councillor Martinello, that council defer item 19.1 to the February 20th, 2018 council meeting. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, so we'll move on to declarations.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'd like to amend it. I've got some proposed amendments to the agenda also.
Okay, go ahead.
So I move that we move item 11.2, the notice of motion to be read as a motion tonight, read as voted on as a motion. And that's the notice of motion related to the clearing of the creek by, or the marking of creek clearance, of public creek clearance by the LTCA in preparation for, spring flooding or, What's the urgency on that? I think it's that we're trying to beat the springtime, and spring is fast approaching.
First we need to address the issue of it being urgent, so we'll look for a 2/3 majority vote of council to have that come forward as an urgent nature.
Do you need a second for that?
If you do, I'll second the motion.
That's fine. So that's under item 611.6 of our procedure bylaw. Moved by Councillor Martinello, second by Councillor Ostrander. The council move item 11.2 from the notice of motion to a motion, and again, that's under 611.6 of the procedure bylaw, which requires a 2/3 majority vote of council. All in favor?
Can we go vote, please?
Begin the recorded vote of Councillor Martinello,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McMurray,
Yes.
Councillor Ostrander,
Yes.
Councillor Chapman,
Yes.
Councillor Vink,
No. Councillor Baker,
Yes.
Mayor Wallace.
No.
Motion is carried.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I have one other proposed amendment to the agenda.
Okay. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to bring this forward as a motion, and it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Ostrander. And the motion reads that council directs staff to excavate all pampas grass and clear out the discharge structure located at the south end of the Harbor Point subdivision detention pond, stormwater detention pond. And the council further directs that all of this work be completed no later than April 15th, 2018. And the attached email, and I won't read it, forms part of this motion. I tried to give this motion to Mrs. Kim at the start of the meeting and wasn't quite sure of how to do it. Mrs. Warren has this process where we can add things at the start of the meeting. And so, would you like that now or, okay?
Okay, so a motion to amend the agenda, moved by Councilor Martello, seconded by Councilor Ostrander. Council direct staff to excavate all the pampas grass and clear up the discharge structure located at the south end of the Harbor Point stormwater detention pond, and further direct that all of this work being completed no later than April 15, 2018. Attached information will form part of the motion. Any further comment?
Sure, and it comes out of the email that's attached to that motion, is that prior to Christmas in early December time, staff were down at the stormwater detention pond, and they did indicate that they would clear out the structure as I requested in that motion. And for different reasons that became, I think, a bit confused at the last budget meeting, it wasn't done. That commitment kind of fell through. And the bottom line is, staff said at the time that they made the commitment to do the clean to the residents, that they needed to have frozen ground in order to drive tractor, heavy equipment across the frozen ground. And that the staff had to notify residents to clear certain objects that were on public property. That didn't happen. This is just part of getting this cleared out. This is part of kind of preparation for heavy rainfall in the spring, and making sure that the fullest extent possible, the stormwater drainage is made as efficient as possible to protect, I guess, the lives and property of bright taxpayers.
Go ahead, Councilor Green.
Are we not at this point just supposed to be discussing whether or not to add it to the
Yes,
agenda?
we are.
I have to describe it.
Okay, seeing nothing further, presume you want to record your vote?
Sure.
Yeah, and again, this is, will fall under section 611.6 to bring it onto the agenda tonight as opposed to allowing it to run its normal course of appearing at the next regular meeting of council. It'll require a 2/3 vote of council.
Begin the recorded vote with Councillor Martinello,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McMurray,
Yes.
Councillor Ostrander,
Yes.
Councillor Chapman,
Yes.
Councillor Byng,
Yes.
Councillor Baker,
Yes.
Mayor Wallace.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
I assume that would come under 11.3 in motions.
Could do. 11.2 is gone. No, 11.2 is gone. It's motion. We would also ask that, for the benefit of everyone on council, that we receive a copy of that email.
For sure, and it is attached to the motion that I just gave to
But
you.
again,
so-
nobody was able to see it.
Understood.
Okay. Anything further? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it was Deputy Mayor McMurray's intent, and I would agree to remove 11.1 as a notice of motion.
That's correct.
So I would move that we withdraw. I guess, could we just withdraw it? Yeah, so we'll withdraw that motion, that notice of motion.
Why don't we make that 11-1 then? Since 11-1 is withdrawn. That makes sense. Okay. We're back to approval of the agenda. Is there anything further from anyone else? So, our amended agenda will now include adding a bylaw authorizing the appointment of representative on behalf of the municipality pursuant to Conservation Authorities Act under section 13(3). We will remove notice of motion 11-1 that is currently in the agenda and replace it with the Harbor Point Storm motion that we just approved. And that 11.2 will be removed and spoken to as a motion this evening. It's on a notice of motion. And just to note, we did receive an email from 7.2 this evening under delegations that due to a very unfortunate personal family matter that the gentleman won't be here this evening to present. Failing that, all in favor of our agenda as amended? Carried, thank you. So we have no statutory public meeting, oh, pardon me, we'll go on to the minutes. So we have moved by Councillor Tadman, second by our Deputy Mayor, that Council approve the February 5th, 2018 Council agenda as amended. I'll read the mover and second around that. So again, approved, amended, very good, thank you. And then moved by Councillor Vink and seconded by our Deputy Mayor that the January 15, 2018 Council meeting minutes be approved as presented. Is there any?
Mr. Mayor, we need declarations of pecuniary interest first.
Thank you for that. I did miss that. Thank you. So, anyone else have declaration of, why am I giving you that? Anyone else have declaration of pecuniary interest? No, so be myself then, under section 5.1 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Any comments, discussion regarding Lakeside Landing of the Dr. Park condominium, also known as the 952849 Ontario Limited, as I am the shareholder of that corporation. Thank you. Anyone else? Move on to announcements. Any announcements this evening? Only that the third weekend of this month that we have the History Week, celebrating heritage in the community, and I believe the theme this year is our barns in the rural part of Brighton. So move on to the adoption of the minutes. 5.1, moved by Councillor Pink, seconded by our Deputy Mayor, that the January 15, 2018 Council meeting minutes be approved as presented. Any comment or question there? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Vic and seconded by our Deputy Mayor, that the January 15, 2018 closed meeting session be approved as presented. Any comments there? None, all in favor? It's carried. No statutory public meeting this evening. We'll move straight into our delegations. And then we have under 7.1, Mr. Graham Keeler is here this evening from Gnomeworks Inc. To make a presentation to council. So you're welcome to come forward, and Stephen or Lucas can help with that microphone.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Graham Heeler. I'm with Coldwell Banker Commercial Real Estate. I was asked to bring a delegation. I have brought my clients with me, who are the principal partners in a company called Gnomeworks Greenhouses, Inc. This is a pharmaceutical marijuana business. The best way I can describe it is a phase one pharmaceutical production business. So there are greenhouses involved. The total building is 57,000 square feet, which we built in 2 phases. There's one lot that you have in the business park that's large enough to fit this building, so it's quite unique. Again, it's 2 phases, so there's a warehouse, production facility, and greenhouse on one side. Phase 2, which would be built within 2 to 3 years of phase 1 being complete, is the same thing again, the Siamese half. So again, more production and more greenhouse. Conceptually, the way this business functions is it's pharmaceutical marijuana. This is a phase 1 production, so they grow the product, they package the product, and then it goes off to a phase 2 producer. So there's no sale of product locally, none of that happens. This goes off to companies that would then extract cannabis oils and this sort of thing that are being used in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's predominantly what it is, and they can speak to more details, so I'd like to invite them up. The offer that was presented to council a couple of weeks ago has since expired. I prepared a new one with a new irrevocable date, which I can present to Mr. Ashton, if that's okay.
Thank
you. Again, I'm a commercial realtor. I do specialize in commercial land, industrial land in particular. I have some brochures here that will show the sorts of things that I get involved in. I understand the need that communities have to generate employment, generate tax revenue, and that sort of thing. And a way to be able to put a park together where businesses can actually work with each other, work together, so that you don't have, so you have a happy family, basically. That's the sort of environment that we try to generate with business parks. So I've done the business park work in Port Hope as well as Port Perry over the years, and this is the Port Hope one here. So I'm going to leave these out if anybody wants to take them. Thank you. And you can see what we do. And I'd like to turn this over to my clients who can answer questions or provide you with a complete presentation.
Excellent.
Okay?
Just before you begin, I'll just make you aware that our council meetings are recorded.
Okay.
So I'd like to introduce yourselves for the record before you begin.
Absolutely. My name is Sean Paula. I'm the CEO of Gnomeworks.
And I'm Anton Kozov, I'm Treasurer of Operations.
So, Mr. Mayor, esteemed council members, curious onlookers, I'd like to thank you all for giving us your time today. I'd just briefly like to mention that unfortunately our third partner, Gurminder Purba, could not be here today. They couldn't find a babysitter, so unfortunately he couldn't make the trip. But he did really insist that we apologize on his behalf. He will be acting as our quality assurance specialist, as well as municipal compliance, and you can find a further list of his credentials in our proposal. We have prepared a presentation which is roughly about 8 or 10 minutes long, or if you're familiar with the proposal, we can just move straight into a Q&A session, or do a combination of
I
both.
think we'll hear the proposal.
Sure, absolutely. So as I understand, you're all a little familiar with the proposal. We have provided, again, a copy for you. There have been a few minor changes, as there will be with such a project, but the overall size and scope is more or less the same. As we only have a limited amount of time here today, I'd like to leave it to your discretion to kind of review that further and tell you a little bit more about ourselves, our company, and how we ended up here in Brighton. So Anton and I met in high school where we became close friends. But after that, we actually kind of both went our separate ways. I went to George Brown College where I attended culinary art school, earned several distinctions there. Following that, I then moved on to Ryerson University where I completed my bachelor in finance.
So yeah, I moved on to college myself also. I got a diploma in police foundations from Centennial College, and then I got a bachelor's degree in criminology from the University of Ontario. That led me to do some work as well as further studies in geographical and intelligence analysis. And over the years, I've worked in various aspects of the private security industry. Now, I knew Sean was doing exceptionally well with culinary studies, and as I was speaking to him closer when he was wrapping up his finance studies, he said he was going to do his own business. So they got me interested because at the time I was working on developing a nonprofit organization for youth that are underprivileged, and we were teaching them entrepreneurship. So naturally, with all that work, I was excited to join Sean.
Right, so we discussed some ideas back and forth and brainstormed a little bit, and our strategy was that we would develop a sustainable, highly efficient irrigation system, which we would then use to grow some of our produce and herbs in-house, which we would use in our dishes. To do that, we drew on some of the research that NASA had conducted on the Mir and International Space Stations. Their primary goal was to produce food as efficiently as possible with a finite amount of resources. Since that was in line with kind of our objectives as well, we adopted some of their research and findings and then moved on to produce our first vertical irrigation system. Now, vertical systems are not new. There's several companies out there right now that produce similar systems that visually look very similar to ours. The difference is, though, a lot of these systems have a dedicated reservoir at the bottom and a pump that sends nutrient solution to the top of the vegetative tower and then where it trickles down. These systems are best described as hydroponic drip systems. Ours differs in that we have integrated pressurization, so we essentially have one reservoir that can support an entire bank of vertical growing systems. There are also several other design characteristics which are beneficial, but this specifically means that it's highly scalable and requires less labor and is less costly in a commercial environment.
So we began growing on a small scale in a greenhouse, all our herbs for the catering company. And as we were doing that, some of our friends and family would come over and take a look at what we're doing. Almost every single one of them at some point in time would ask us kind of half-jokingly if we were growing marijuana or if we were planning to by some time. Now, we weren't actually, but we weren't surprised we were getting those questions was because of what you see in the news and the media. It's very prevalent, especially the last several years. However, the reason why actually we weren't thinking about cannabis at all is because most of the strains, or a lot of them, tend to stretch quite far. In a vertically oriented system such as we had at the small greenhouse, a plant like that wouldn't work. But Sean and I sat down and decided to bounce a few ideas around, and we realized that actually conceptually, our system works for cannabis really, really well. So I think I have to say it was right around that point in time that some of the little bit of work that we were doing on the system and the research actually became a full-time project in and of itself. We sat down and developed the first horizontal iteration of the system, the first concept. We partnered with several patients for whom we got proper licensing from Health Canada in order to grow their plants on their behalf. And that allowed us to test our system. And the first trial runs went exceptionally well. We got really excited about it, and we started to, we went to work and designed a second iteration of it. And that iteration we filed for a provisional patent with the U.S. Patent Office. And actually, if I want to just quickly turn your attention to this page, this document right here that has some of the photos, maybe we could show you a little bit what we're talking about here so you understand more visually. Do you want to explain some of this?
Right, so just on the first page, figure 1 through 4, this is just an example of the system. As we were growing some basil, some cilantro, kale as well. On the second page, again, you have, this is just an example of romaine. There's baby romaine, then more mature romaine plants, and then a harvested head of romaine lettuce there. Figure 8 and 9 involves the first iteration of our horizontal concept. So this was when we just got our licenses and the first plant that we grew. We were actually expecting to encounter a few problems, but it actually turned out really well. As you can see, there's no deficiencies, no overwatering, no abundance of nutrients. The plants actually thrived in the system. Figure 10, 11, and 12, this is an example of the second iteration of our horizontal system, the refined version, which we filed for a patent. Figure 10 includes some baby plants that were just placed in. 11 is about 3 weeks of growth. And then figure 12 is an example of the root systems that we were able to achieve in our system. Figure 13, 14, and 15 are an example of there's two types of our system. There's a vegetative setup and then a flower setup. One accommodates baby plants and one accommodates more mature plants. So figure 13 through 15 is an example of the mature flowering tube. So you can see figure 13 is just budding flowers. 14 is a more close-up of the same plant. Again, you'll note there's no deficiencies or problems with growth. And then 15 is the mature plants just before harvest. And then the last page is just a brief example, 3D renderings of the phase 1 of the project and then phase 2 of the project for your reference. So cannabis cultivation up until now has mainly consisted of traditional means, methods which have their origins essentially in the dark basements of prohibition. What many individuals don't know is that these methods and these processes of indoor cultivation can be extremely inefficient. And when it comes to these methods, from high intensity lighting to drain to waste feeding, we knew that there was a more optimal way to cultivate cannabis.
So understanding these concepts, what we decided to do was place our greatest focus and emphasis in this on sustainability and efficiency. We were able to essentially eliminate all growing media completely. We don't use soilless mix, cocoa fiber, lava rock, rock wool. Our clones are supported in a foam composite disc and root directly to the net pot, where the plants remain for the entirety of their growth and they are taken down only at harvest. This allows us to essentially eliminate all the associated processing and material costs completely. And the pressurization of our system allows us to mist nutrient solution directly to the rhizosphere in a fine incremental amounts. Since the entire system is closed loop, excess solution is filtered and recycled back to the reservoir. This gives us the ability to determine with fair accuracy the average amount of solution consumed per plant. This enables us to mix exactly the amount of solution we need and in turn minimizes the end runoff.
So at this point, you may be wondering, other than our irrigation system, what kind of makes us different from the next guy? So to answer that, I would just kind of have to refer to the conversations we have had with other startups and financiers in the space. And I do caution you, the vast majority, from about 85 to 90% of them, have the same end goal. They want to go through the motions, they want to acquire their license, and then sell it, cash in, and move on. Anton and I are a little bit of a different breed. We're not especially concerned with financial gain. Not to say that money isn't important. I mean, of course, everybody needs to eat. But we come at it from a little bit of a different angle. I suppose I can't speak for Anton. I think he's a little bit more interested in applying new technologies and growing methods to farming and agriculture. But from my end of things, I'm just very passionate about plants. And not necessarily just specifically cannabis, but all plants. I find it fascinating how you can take a seed, just add a little bit of water, and then watch it propagate, grow from seedling to flower. It's essentially it's the epitome of the miracle of life. So I can't help but be awestruck by the entire process. It's almost to me like watching a child be born, watching them grow and learn. I mean, just with fewer fights. I suppose there's some fights, but my point is that we're not looking to just develop this company, cash and move on. We really want to develop our careers here. We want to grow and perhaps become part of the community.
So as this industry progresses, it'll be interesting to actually see how things turn out. Now, most recently it's been found that baby boomers make up the fastest growing consumer segment of cannabis in Canada. Now, I'm sure there's several reasons for this, but I think one of the main ones is that I think our aging population is just looking for alternative forms of treatment. And indeed, there's actually several universities that are currently conducting studies here in Canada that look at the potential medical applications of the plant.
Right, so some of the notable ones are the University of Saskatchewan, where Dr. Robert LaPrairie has been tasked with assessing the efficacy of some derivative medicinal, some medicines that can treat a variety of different ailments, including addiction, pain, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Huntington's disease, and I believe, what's the last one there? Anxiety, right. There's also, and University of Saskatchewan is not the only one. There's also the University of Guelph, where Dr. Mike Dixon has also been tasked with reviewing some of the 150 compounds within this plant to see what kind of uses there can be there. Perhaps one of the most common forms of treatment using cannabis that we're all familiar with is that and cancer treatment. But when people think cancer and cannabis, they think, anti-nausea. And it turns out that it actually goes far beyond that. I have trouble with this name, but there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather, who is a clinical specialist, and he specializes in addiction medicine. He actually gave a lecture at Harvard Medical last year, and he maintains that cannabinoids actually have several anti-tumor properties. Those can include anti-proliferative effects, which essentially stop cancer cells from multiplying. There's anti-angiogenic effects, which stop the formation of blood vessels, which help tumors to grow. There's anti-metastatic effects, which prevent the cancer cells from moving from one organ to another. And there's also, he also cites the work of Dr. Miguel Guzman at the University of Madrid, who observed that cannabinoids might actually have apoptotic effects, which means that they induce death in cancer cells. That's very, very important to know that the treatment that he was examining, it induced death in the cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue surrounding the tumor intact and unaffected. Dr. Hergenrather's research is quite extensive, actually, and we can't possibly cover all of it in the few minutes that we have here. We have included in the package to you the PDF of the presentation that he gave at Harvard Medical. So we invite you to take a look at that. There's a plethora of really great information in that package there.
So as the research progresses in this area, it's important to know it's not just medically the type of research being conducted. And University of Guelph currently is also looking at methods of cultivation. Now that includes looking at various lighting systems, soil irrigation, and how these inputs affect the plants and their growth. This is especially encouraging to us because back when we started several years ago doing this, it seemed that everybody was focused on the legalization of marijuana in itself and looking at the big companies and trying to choose which ones to invest stock in. What nobody was really talking about is how these companies produce the plant and the amount of resources that's required for it. So just seeing some of this research going on, again, it just sort of validates our approach into the industry. And we could sit here and mention study after study, statistic after statistic, but I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it, and indeed every day there's something new being published about cannabis. So I think what's most important about it is understanding that there needs to be more research done on this plant and regarding the mental physiological effects it has on people. And marijuana is most certainly not the destructive substance we have been taught it to be, but of course it's not benign either. And just having some of these considerations in your mind would be good for this last few points.
Right, so these last few points, I suppose they kind of relate also back to how we differentiate ourselves from other startups. Our ambition extends just simply beyond just cultivating the plant. If you'll note in phase 2 of the floor plans that we have, there is a checkered area, and this checkered area we do not actually have a specific use for as of yet. What we do hope in some way down the line is to kind of involve ourselves maybe perhaps in a little bit of a research initiative. What form that will take, we're not entirely sure as of yet, but perhaps an example could be forming a partnership with a local university to have graduate students come through and do like a research term at the facility. And there's also some interest in exploring the use of hemp as a sustainable material or an alternative construction material like bamboo. Again, we have not included those in the proposal because realistically it's kind of hard to project beyond a 5-year time horizon, but that's kind of what we're also looking at down the road. And lastly, I'd like to also touch on why we're essentially here at the municipality of Brighton. So when we got started looking around at the various properties for this project, we'd been driving around for a few hours, and we found the advertisement for the industrial parks. We happened to drive out here just on a whim, and we were really surprised by what we saw because it just seemed to kind of really fit what we were looking for and its intended purpose. Other than that, aside from both hailing from the city, we're both kind of more like low-key individuals. So the quaintness and the quietness of the town, at least for me, was really, really attractive. And last we also, I believe, camped out at the provincial park when we were in high school. I mean, that was many years ago, but essentially that was really all we knew about the area. So I decided to do a little bit more looking into it. And of course I read about the history of the orchards in the area, you know, the railway and museum and whatnot. But I think what kind of really caught our attention, even though maybe a little bit silly, was the town motto, where the past greets the future. I thought that were somewhat fateful words. You might be familiar, University of Guelph is projecting a global population of 9 billion by the year 2030. This is a population that's going to need to be fed with food grown using less water and less land, and in a more dynamic climate. And we just thought, you know, there would be something, there would be something to be said for having this revolution take place, where the past greets the future, and it kind of made us feel like this is kind of where we're going. So again, we just brushed on the topic. There's plenty more information out there. We have included a reference document on the back of the proposal, which you can look at further. Notable references in there is obviously the Federal Task Force Review of Cannabis Policy. There's also a CBC document examining new ways of cultivating the plant, as well as some other more casual documentaries which are really good and informative about, you know, the previous history of marijuana and the prohibition that surrounded it. That's pretty much all I believe for our presentation, so I suppose we just open up the floor to questions.
Again, thank you very much for the presentation. We look for questions or clarification from members of council. Councilor Vink, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. The one is just wondering about your timeline for startup. And the second one is how many employees do you plan to have?
Go ahead, absolutely. So the cannabis industry is quite unique because there's this back and forth as far as the application process goes with the government. There is a little bit of a delay that other industries don't necessarily face. What we're hoping to have is our application submitted. There's some other security work that needs to be done, but to have our application submitted in the next 6 months. Next 3 months. Following that, we expect another 3 to 6 months of the first few initial stages of the application review process that the government has to conduct. So that leaves us around about a year. In a year's time, that's when construction will commence, and we expect construction to proceed for about a 6-month period, at which point there are pre-licensing inspections that occur. So they come in, they take a look at the facility, make sure it follows all of the planned schematics, and then we're issued a license. So we're looking about at roughly about a 2-year time frame from when we acquire a property to our license. As far as the employment goes, phase 1, we are looking to employ 3 administrators. There's, I believe, 4 full-time workers and 7 part-time workers. And then phase 2 includes, I think, up to 8 full-time workers and 15 part-time workers. I would like to add, though, there was a recent article, just because it is kind of relevant to the conversation. There was a recent article, I believe, posted yesterday in the Financial Post with established licensed producers discussing the effects of the minimum wage increase from $11.60 to $14. And many of them have taken issue. Fire Incorporated specifically has said that this increase will cause an additional $600,000 of costs to them, and the increase from $14 to $15 next year will add $300,000. We have originally budgeted $20 an hour for our part-time workers. In addition to that, we have added an additional 25% for ancillary costs. So roughly speaking, we budgeted about $25 per hour for our part-time workers. We wanted to pay them a very competitive rate, as just from our personal experience, or my personal experience, I've had the privilege to work with some really great companies who have treated their employees exceptionally well. And it just kind of taught me the value of respecting people and your employees and seeing how that can affect the overall operation of the company. And that was something that we kind of looked to aspire to.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Martinello?
Yeah, just 3 questions, if I may. It's about the closed system you spoke of then. So how much water will you require? How much water will you put out as sewage? And how do you control odor? And how can you guarantee people that, you know, the people that surround you, that they won't be affected by the odor, that they won't smell the operation?
Absolutely. Thanks. So I'll just hit on the odor control first. Obviously, in servicing our patients right now, that's obviously something that we've had to consider thus far. There are several means to do this. The first is the most common form, which is using activated carbon filters to filter out the material. These are not 100% effective. I'd say they're about 85-90% effective. Another form is ozone generators, which generate O3, which is a highly reactive molecule. It's administered into the exhaust system where it combines with other molecules and essentially changes them. However, we've decided to not implement this as there seems to be growing concern with the use of these types of systems. The most widely used system currently used in established firms is a unit that's placed inside the exhaust port, which emits a solution which works in the same way that the ozone generator does. A molecule binds, an ion binds with the molecule and essentially changes it. So it doesn't mask the odor, it essentially eliminates the odor, to whereby you'd be able to stand right outside the exhaust port and you would not be able to have any odor released. As far as the water usage goes, phase 1, we're looking at 190,000 liters per month, and phase 2, 380,000 liters per month. Again, these are conservative figures. We used the amount used of our most mature plants to kind of extrapolate these figures, but we expect that these figures are a little bit higher than they will be.
Low high figures, less water.
As for the runoff, our solution, because we're able to use a closed loop system, we can mix the volume of nutrients required fairly precisely to the point where we will have only about between 5 to 10% waste, and that is on the higher end. Something that's important to point out is water-based systems require nutrient solution of a much lower concentration than soil-based systems. So we actually dilute our nutrients to about 15% of recommended dosage. So the little bit of runoff that there is actually quite diluted, and again, and then we don't use any kind of hazardous chemicals in the entire process for cleaning and whatnot.
Anything else? Comments, questions? Go ahead, Councilor Osterman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just back to the odor, that's really my biggest concern, especially for where the proposal is, which is, our industrial park is sandwiched between residential neighborhoods. When I look at your proposal, it's primarily greenhouse based, and with the factory, the warehouse sandwiched in the middle. Would the molecular binding system that you were talking about be used at the greenhouse level or within the building itself?
So it would be, excuse me, sir. So that would be placed inside the building, but in the exhaust vent. So it wouldn't be exposed to the outside environment.
What about odor coming from the plants being grown from the greenhouses?
So yeah, this is a great question. Right now we're looking at greenhouses, and we're actually anticipating that they will be completely sealed. Any kind of air going in and out will come through filters and then be expelled through filters. Unlike traditional greenhouses, a lot of them have open air ventilation. Yeah, we're not looking at that at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit. It's kind of like saying it's a greenhouse, but really it's a hybrid greenhouse. The only thing greenhouse about it is the roof is transparent. It is a sealed roof. It doesn't open, like Sean said. So essentially, it might as well be a warehouse with a clear roof because the siding and everything is closed off. And again, it's a sealed environment because for us, we care about pests. And so far, in all our trial runs and how we've been growing for our patients, we don't use any pesticide. So we're very, very particular about what comes in to the place, including the people, the workers there. So everything is sealed off, and again, it goes through filters and it goes out through filters.
Councilor McMurray?
Thanks, Mayor. Gentlemen, could you describe this product as organic marijuana? You have no pesticides, you have no water.
Right. Unfortunately, due to the definition of organic, we're unable to do so. By definition, organic means that the plants need to be grown in some sort of a growing medium, whether it be coconut fiber or soil, which is really unfortunate because I don't believe that's necessarily the growing media that contributes to the plant, although it does in some form one way or another. But I think it's more that it's the nutrients that you're providing to your plant. And in that regard, our nutrients are fine, but because it's simply not grown in a soil-based system, we're unable to classify ourselves as organic.
What else? Councilor Randall?
So I'll just circle back, if I can, to the filtration systems. So in fact, there's two different types of filtration systems we use. One is the activated carbon on the greenhouses, and that's 85 to 95% efficient. So people will smell it outside the greenhouses.
So, sorry, no, that's just initially, and then it will pass through the second phase of order control, which is then the systems that administer the next.
The molecular binding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a question about the employment? So, when you answered the question about employment, phase one was gonna be 7 full-time and, can't remember those. 7 full-time and the number part-time. And then it would go in phase 2 to 8 full-time and 15 part-time. When phase 2 comes around, is that the total complement, 8 full-time and 15 part-time, or is that in addition to what was included in phase 1?
Yes, that will be the full complement, but that also includes 3 administrative positions as well.
Understood.
Anyone else? Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. So gentlemen, thank you for coming and doing this presentation. Most of my colleagues have answered the pertinent questions or asked the pertinent questions. You're gonna obviously have to follow Health Canada's security procedures, which dictates an 8-foot fence with barbed wire and so on and so on. Considering you're proposing purchasing land in the industrial park, this is a 24/7 operation?
No, in terms of operation, it won't be a 24/7, but we will have security staff on site overnight if you are trying to address the security issue.
What I'm alluding to is how it's lit.
How it's lit. Yeah, we're gonna have some of the area lit around it just to deter anybody trying to get in addition to all the other security measures.
What I'm looking for is if there's going to be enhanced lighting and would there be a permanent glow from the industrial park within the town limits?
Oh, no, it won't be because we have light deprivation that would be put in place. So any kind of light from inside the greenhouse would not penetrate outside.
And outside security lighting, is there full, obviously it's going to be full perimeter?
That's great, yeah.
Okay, so again, I'm looking to see whether this is going to be lit up like a Christmas tree
Yeah,
24/7.
No, the only lighting that we're administering, the longest lighting cycle is the vegetative lighting cycle, which is 18 hours. So we were just anticipating running it during daylight hours. So from about 6 o'clock in the morning to, I suppose about 10 at night, although with the light deprivation, we'll be able to close the curtains to kind of reduce the amount of light being available.
Right, but that's your interior lighting for the plants. I'm talking about perimeter security.
On the perimeter, no, just a few lights for security purposes, but there won't be considerable.
Yeah, no, there shouldn't be any huge amount of lighting where it's glowing, if you're saying. It shouldn't affect the residential area. I'll have to look into it with the planner, who's doing the particular lighting for us. But I was assured that it should not be very far. Essentially, most of our security measures would be the cameras and the motion sensors. That is what we're looking at having there.
Thank you. I'm seeing Mr. Ashton's motion behind you make a comment. Go ahead.
So to answer your question about the security lighting, it would go through the site plan process and we would require full cutoff, so there wouldn't be any of that bleeding onto adjacent properties. So they would have to have a lighting engineer say full cutoff on the property.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Seeing that, anyone else? Councilor Ostrander, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is probably for staff. I know it is for staff. Are there any concerns with regard to the requirement for water?
Go ahead, CIO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. What they're talking about is about 12 cubic meters a day, so figure that's about a truckload and a half when it comes to get water.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your presentation this evening. And our motion is moved by Councilor Tappan, seconded by Councilor Ding. Council received the delegation from Greenfield regarding the sale of Lot 10 East in the Brighton Industrial Park to Known Works Greenhouses, Inc. Is there any need to refer this further back to staff, or we're satisfied with just what we heard this evening? Seeing nothing, all in favor? It's carried.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Just to be clear, we didn't approve this Known operation, we
received the
simply
delegation.
received the delegation, okay?
Okay, so now we move on, again, 7.2, unfortunately I had to withdraw this evening, we move on to 7.3, and we have Olivia Sparrow and Camilla Burrell of EOR regarding the proposed stormwater master plan update. Ladies, welcome, come forward, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Camilla Corral, and I'm one of the senior partners with Emmons and Olivier Resources. And with me tonight is Olivia Sparrow, one of our water resources engineers. Our senior project manager, Cecilio Olivier, was not able to attend this meeting with us this evening as he is assisting the Minnesota governor's team with public hearings addressing mitigation of environmental impacts of a mining permit in northern Minnesota. We are here tonight to introduce our firm and to address questions that council members brought up at the January 15th council meeting regarding Brighton's stormwater master plan. If it would be all right, we have brought handouts that we wanted to distribute that address some of those questions. I'll just introduce our firm while Olivia passes out the handouts. EOR is a water-centric consulting firm based out of the Twin Cities, Minnesota. We have clients in both the United States and in Canada. For 20 years, our firm has helped local, state, provincial, and federal entities develop comprehensive stormwater management solutions. Central to our company culture is taking a multidisciplined approach to our work. Our multidisciplined team, which consists of water resource engineers, hydrogeologists, limnologists, biologists, landscape architects, have successfully developed stormwater management plans that effectively characterize the issues, explore solutions that maximize the benefits, and have buy-in from council, city staff, the development community, and residents. As our proposal notes, our staff has been involved in the development of 80 stormwater master plans and watershed management plans, 20 of which were highlighted in the proposal that we submitted to the city. Before I turn it over to Olivia, I just wanted to make one more point. She'll address the questions that were brought up at the city council meeting, but I wanted to make the point that our primary clients are public entities, and we are frequently called upon by local governments to provide a fresh perspective on their stormwater issues. So we are familiar with embarking on projects in communities that are new to us. Being a third party or a new face allows us to have discussions that are sometimes difficult regarding stormwater maintenance, regarding flooding, regarding retrofits. So we are able to bridge controversial topics and come to solutions that address everybody's needs. With that, I'll turn it over to Olivia.
So as Camilla mentioned, EOR has significant experience with planning, designing, and constructing stormwater management facilities. And our experience would be used to inform the stormwater master plan update for Brighton. And the planning effort would focus on evaluating the performance and capacity of the existing stormwater infrastructure in Brighton and looking at how that performance or capacity would continue moving forward as the municipality continues to grow, and looking at what infrastructure needs there are moving forward. So EOR brings all of the options for stormwater management to the table when it comes to stormwater master planning, and this does include low impact development and green infrastructure. These are necessary alternatives because long-term solutions need to go beyond rate control provided by stormwater management ponds. This is also in line, low impact development and green infrastructure is in line with the environmentally sensitive and sustainable approach to land development that is called for in Brighton's own official plan. And it's also consistent with the direction of the province's policy. And just one example of that is that the provincial government is requiring municipalities to implement low impact development as part of Ontario's Climate Resiliency Action Plan. So developing a stormwater master plan would also take into account operations within the municipality as well. Our definition of a successful planning effort is one that leaves the municipality and its staff better equipped to manage stormwater and all of the issues encompassed in it moving forward. We do this by developing models and tools that can be used by staff as they review permit applications, developing science-based mitigation strategies that can be defensible to a range of audiences moving forward, which assists in efficient implementation, and articulating the range of benefits provided by stormwater management alternatives. Just as one example, we recently finished the stormwater management plan in Thunder Bay, and as part of that, we identified hundreds of low-impact development retrofit opportunities in their existing built-out area. They've taken those opportunities and the benefits we estimated could be achieved by implementing them, and that has opened up a lot of funding opportunities that wouldn't have been available with traditional gray or piped retrofit opportunities. So in addition to all of our technical experience with stormwater management, we also bring to the team Annalise Grieve, who is a respected expert in the Ontario environmental assessment process, which can sometimes be a headache. We understand that as well. And so our team would be able to develop a stormwater master plan that's bulletproof to all of the issues. And that's really essential moving forward, because your stormwater master plan will be your roadmap with a bunch of activities that you want to be efficiently approved so that you can implement all of them. And our proposed timeline to develop the master plan still stands. They'll bring it by the end of the year. And it's detailed on the back of the handout as well. I'd also wanted to let you know that EOR is committed to growing and providing more services like this in Ontario, and I'll be moving back. I've been in Minnesota for 4 years. I'm originally from Mississauga, and I'll be moving back to open our first Ontario office in June. And so with that, I'd like to say we're happy to answer any questions, and thank you for considering our proposal.
Thanks very much. We appreciate your presentation so far this evening. Can you just provide a couple of the low-impact opportunities that give some examples of what you provide in Thunder Bay?
In Thunder Bay, specifically? Yep. So they range from rain gardens on the corner of residential side streets to looking at larger opportunities in park spaces where you can actually bring a subsurface drainage pipe to the surface so that it adds to the amenity of the park space. Another opportunity that we've been looking at more and more, because it's becoming popular in Minnesota and also in Edmonton as part of their LID location study we just completed, is rainwater harvesting. And so that's taking either clean rainwater that falls on rooftops that's just, it's very clean, it only gets a little bit of pollutants off of the rooftop, and using that to irrigate. We've also seen clients use it within the buildings as well. And we can also collect stormwater in ponds or subsurface storage containers and use that to irrigate. So it can either be from the rooftops or drainage, surface drainage.
And could I just clarify that for Thunder Bay Stormwater Management Plan, the low impact development retrofits that we recommended were in addition to infrastructure upgrades that we knew that they needed. But the provision of this low impact development green infrastructure provides additional capacity in their system for the peak events and the flooding that was very problematic to the city and its residents.
Very good. Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. Welcome, ladies. I have a question reference integration. We already have a storm management plan done by Geneva some time ago. What, in a general sense, what type of integration do you plan? How do you accomplish integration with a plan of this nature, considering all the new subdivisions, et cetera, that have been built up over the years since that plan was extant?
Okay. So, Mayor, if I understand the question correctly, what we typically do is we take the existing plan and look at the documentation and the modeling results, or what that estimates for capacity within your infrastructure. And then we look at what's been upgraded in the 10 or 20-year time frame since that plan was last developed. And we look at changes in land use as well. So we would use that as the base of information, and then we would add to it.
Ms. Martinello?
Can I ask you a question?
Unless there's anyone else who wants a question. Oh, so you've got one, then Councillor Baker, go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So when you prepared the proposal here, were you aware of section 5.3 of the request for proposals, called disclosure, where it says, all proponents are aware that their proposals are deemed public records and may be subject to disclosure upon request. Do you have a problem with the disclosure of any part of your proposal to any member of the public?
No, we don't.
Can I ask you?
Councillor Baker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for coming before us. I appreciate you appearing before council. It's quite refreshing to see a company put a proposal that's been made fully public. It's not always the case in this municipality. One of the concerns that's been brought forward to me by residents and surrounding the previous discussions about awarding this contract is the cost differential. We've only had 2 bids that's been made public. There's a considerable cost difference between your proposal and the competing one. Can you speak to that?
Mr. Mayor. So we haven't seen the other proposal, so we can't speak to why it's different, but we can say that what we've written in our proposal is exactly what we think is needed to address the request for proposal. And I would add that it's not unusual as we embark on new plans that we are a higher cost. And what we've done in the past is we've also worked to try and find other grant opportunities that can help offset that additional cost moving forward.
Can I add to that response quickly? I would say that the proposal that we put together is a comprehensive stormwater master plan that is looking at a full range of opportunities and taking the municipal class CA process into account in an effort to come up with, like Olivia said, a bulletproof plan that will address all the issues that we would anticipate coming from your community and the indigenous communities in the area, versus another plan that might just provide the typical engineering solutions to a flooding or water quality problem.
Thank you. Ms. Martinello?
And can I ask 2 parts to this question? It's kind of one question, 2 parts embedded. So is either one of you a professional engineer in Ontario?
Yes, I am. And then we also have on our team Mike Gregory from Computational Hydraulics International, and we brought him onto the team because he has considerable experience looking at financing stormwater master plans, and so we brought him on for that component.
Thanks. And my follow-on. Are you aware of any part of the Ontario Professional Engineers Act that will either prevent you from disclosing the proposal or require you to make the proposal available to the public?
I am not, but I know some prefer to go through the Freedom of Information Act.
But you'll have no requirement to do that in terms of your proposal, none whatsoever?
I don't think so.
Okay, good enough, thanks.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. As you're probably aware, Brighton is located on a floodplain. And we have a lot of problems with low-lying areas and that sort of thing. So what sort of a topographical picture do you work with, before you start the plan itself?
So, I understand that the stormwater master plan for the city of Brighton is looking at the urban area or the urban core. We always look at the area of interest, but everything coming through that area of interest as well. So as Olivia and I drove around the city of Brighton the hour before this meeting, we can see that there's quite a difference at the top of the watershed in topography to the bottom of the watershed, and that the bottom of the watershed is very flat, and then the constraint that you have on the other side is Lake Ontario. I'm working on a stormwater management plan right now for the city of Grand Marais, which is in a very similar setting and a little bit smaller than the city of Brighton. But we have a lot of topography, a downtown community in a very flat part, and then right next to it we have Lake Superior, which is recently experiencing very high lake levels, which is constraining how quickly water can get out of that downtown area once it starts flooding. So again, we are looking at what the existing infrastructure can handle, whether or not there are needs to upgrade that infrastructure or better maintain that infrastructure, and then what are the other improvements that can be made in the upstream part or the upland part of the watershed, as well as the downstream part of the watershed, to figure out how to retain and store that water and bleed that out or infiltrate that water to the extent that you can, so that you're minimizing the total volume that's getting into the areas that are more prone to flooding.
Good answer. Thank you.
Councilor Ostrander, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is your firm retained by, working with, or acting on behalf of any development companies currently developing lands in the municipality of Brighton?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
No.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
It's about trade secrets. Have you ever, or proprietary information, have you ever been involved with the development of stormwater master plan where you've run into being unable to release your proposal because of either trade secrets or proprietary information?
I don't think that our stormwater management approach is a trade secret, so no.
And you've been involved with how many of these about?
Stormwater management plans and watershed management plans, 80.
Thanks, Al.
Anything further coming forward? Seeing none? Ladies, thank you very much for the presentation this evening, very detailed, we do appreciate it. So the motion been moved by our Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Tadman. The Council received the delegation from the Sparrow and Camilla Burrell of EOR regarding the proposed stormwater master plan. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so we have one under citizens' comment this evening. Move on to item 8, and we'll ask for Cheryl Langer to come forward, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors, Clerk, CAO. My name is Cheryl Langevin, and I live at 6 Cove Crescent. Thank you, ladies, for coming from Eamon to let us in on your stormwater proposal and all its transparency. First of all, I'd like to mention that I and Mrs. Richardson became involved with this journey when we approached Council for maintenance on the Harbour Point Pond, as our houses surround the pond. And as everyone's aware, there's been no investigation, assessment, or maintenance to the pond for 15 years. We're aware of the issues that come with climate change and our environment. Flooding was experienced in Brighton last year, and I suspect will occur this coming spring. Now I'm here to speak about the disclosures. I read the letter from Mr. Tony Fleming of Cunningham and Swan stating the reasons that Jewel Engineering feels they are unable to let the proposal become public knowledge. In paragraph 2 of Mr. Fleming's letter, it stated that the proposal was provided to the municipality with the implicit understanding that it would not be disclosed to the public and that it contains confidential commercial and financial information. As a layperson, I would think having information about the commercial and financial aspects of the proposal very important to assist the councillors with decision making, i.e. this person could be near bankruptcy and this information was not made available to council, and council also should then have the ability to investigate the proponents to their satisfaction. In the Brighton RFP, it states in the disclosure on page 11 of paragraph 5.3, all proponents are aware that their proposals are deemed public records and may be subject to disclosure upon request. Upon request can be from any individual and not necessarily through the Information and Privacy Commissioner unless stated under the disclosures. To prevent the release of information, the proponent must state that the proposal is submitted in confidence and indicate the nature of the confidential information and what harm would result from the release. As noted above, it is stated that the proposal contains information about commercial and financial information, but does not state what harm would result to dual engineering from the disclosure of this information. The proposals were submitted to Mr. Kelly and Mr. Watson, employees of the municipality, and yet our councillors who are elected officials of the municipality did not have a copy of this proposal. The council was elected by the tax-paying citizens of Brighton to work on our behalf. How are they able to make informed and educated decisions on our behalf when one of the proposals is off limits? It is my understanding that the CAO and staff work for the municipality, and that staff do not work independently of the council. They review information in all aspects, and in this case, the two proposals, and bring the information proposals back to council for each of the councillors to peruse, digest, and compare in order to make his or her own decision, discuss the proposals, and vote on their decisions with an educated vote. I don't think this happened in this situation. In addition, information submitted by Mr. Kelly and reviewed by Mr. Watson on each of the proponents, which is attached to the agenda for this evening, notes that Eamon has much more experience with stormwater master plans and is also presently involved with the MOECC on the Stormwater Guidance Manual. Stormwater management and the Stormwater Master Plan is extremely important to the municipality of Brighton. Also, I believe it is council that bears the anger, resentment, and mistrust from its citizens for bad, incorrect, or poor decisions, not staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Appreciate your comment this evening. So 8.1, that's all we have under that. So moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by our Deputy Mayor. The council received the citizens' comment from February 5th, 2018 council meeting. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we had this presentation recently at a council meeting, and I'll just go ahead and read the motion, see if there's any further questions. Moved by our Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Tadman. The council, the meeting held on February 4th, 2018, consider staff report regarding, oh, that's great. Get the wrong date here. Council meeting previously held, council considered a staff report regarding the Blue Dot Declaration, the right to a healthy environment, and that the resolution be presented to council to endorse the Blue Dot Declaration for the municipality of Brighton. Any comments or questions? Go ahead, Councilor Moore.
Yeah, I fully support this type of initiative, but I don't want it to become too binding type of thing. And when I look at what we're signing on to, I don't know that we currently need it, and that we're in a position to, in the future, need it. And I'll just read some of the things that I guess we're bound to. It says, one of them is ensure that infrastructure and development projects protect and enhance human health and the environment. I haven't seen that happening. It says, address climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and implementing adaptive measures, conserve energy, and other resources. I guess I'm just concerned that if we actually sign on to this, we've met some obligation that we aren't meeting and that we can't meet. And again, I fully support what the Blue Dot program says, and I fully support what the group that came here says, but I just don't think we'll meet the requirements, and I can't support this for that reason. Again, I support what Blue Dot says, but I don't think we're anywhere close to any of this, the right to.
So I think the easy way to handle that is simply to refer this back to staff, and staff could inquire whether we need to support this in its entirety, or if there's a possibility to somewhat modify the resolution that it meets what Brighton can offer the group without, as you're saying, signing on for everything else. Councillor Tadman, go ahead. Councillor Tadman, go ahead.
Thank you. In reading this, the one statement, I don't think we're signing on to, you know, maybe 100% of this, we're going, what it says, shall strive to take a precautionary approach when making decisions that could impact human health or the environment.
Thank you. See you later.
I guess you could just say you endorse it in principle. And that way you would be agreeing with the principles of it without committing to it.
Anyone else? Councilor Ostrander, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also point out there's at least one bullet point that is a county responsibility, so for us to take that on would be responsible, which is the reduce solid waste and promote reuse, recycle, and compost, and that's a county responsibility. I don't have a problem endorsing it in principle, although it's an incredibly watered down way of doing things, and if we're gonna go down this road, I'd be curious what the cost would be to the municipality to actually do things like promote a sustainable food system and enable walking and cycling and public transit. We sort of click away at these things slowly, but if we're gonna sign up to do something like this, I think we need to take responsibility and make sure that we're prepared to go down this road fully.
So we're looking for motion to refer?
Yes.
Okay. Cost and implementation. So we're referring to staff. Okay, so moved by Councilor Ostrander, second by Councilor Marnell, the council refer to staff item 9.1 to report back to council on the cost and implementation. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, so 9.2, we have the report here, but the motion that was set has been changed, so I'll read what I have and then see if there's any further discussion. 9.2 has been moved by Councilor Martell and seconded by our Deputy Mayor. The Council Municipality of Brighton received the report regarding the appointment of Integrity Commissioner and closed meeting investigator, and the Council defer the appointment of an Integrity Commissioner closed session investigator until January of 2019. Go ahead.
Sure. My understanding is that there's no requirement for us to appoint one until March of 2019. I think that my experience with integrity commissioners and myself and Councillor Tapman have been part of this is that generally they are used as a vindictive hammer against people who choose to dissent. The other thing is...
Technically, you said enough. I'm gonna
okay,
there
understood.
because it is a motion to defer, and we should
understood.
vote on the motion.
Understood. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Rather than, so you did get a bit of explanation there, so. So seeing nothing further, there's no other, it is a motion to defer, and there's no debate on a motion to defer. So at this point, those in favor of a motion to defer until January? All in favor? And that is carried.
Can I record a vote, please?
Yep. No, this is defer, go ahead.
And I apologize for that.
I was gonna bring up one point, but that's fine, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'll begin the recorded vote with Councilor Martinello.
Yes to the deferral.
So that's a yes.
Deputy Mayor McMurray,
Yes.
Councillor Ostrander,
Yes.
Councillor Chapman,
No.
Councillor Vink,
No,
Councillor Baker,
Yes.
Mayor Wallace.
No.
The motion is carried.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Ostrander, second by Councillor Baker. We're now on 9.3. The council received the reporter's information regarding the stormwater master plan award. Any comments going forward? Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. So considering how much council has pushed for this to happen, and with respect to the inability of Jewel to attend tonight, do you know at this point whether or not they intend to appear in the near future, and whether or not, or when this will be coming back to council to make a decision on this RFP?
CAO, want to make some comments on it, please?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was their intention to be here tonight, and I think in the interest of fairness, since we're sort of outside the normal RFP process, that they be given the opportunity to come and state their case, I suppose. So, given the situation, that's kind of difficult. So, at our first opportunity to speak with that individual, and perhaps Lucas can contact someone from their office and get some more information as to what the first opportunity that aligned with the council meeting. And if it goes on too far, obviously, we can't wait forever.
Councillor Martello?
Just a question about the report itself. This is a report about additional information. Were both companies given the opportunity to provide additional information? And if they were, in what form and when did that happen?
Lucas, go ahead.
No, I did not. I just used the data or the information that was presented to staff in the actual RFP document to create that report.
Okay. Can I ask?
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I know the contract is sitting there waiting to be awarded, and I wouldn't like to see either the proponent be left in the on tender hooks because one or the other couldn't make an appearance for whatever reason. I'm not saying that Mr. Jewell doesn't have a good reason. So I would like to find out whether the other company would have a problem with waiting 3 weeks, for example.
I think what has been indicated is that our staff will be in touch with Jewel and be able to provide council an idea of when they plan on attending our council with a presentation, if and when they plan on attending. Go ahead.
Would it be, and I guess through you to council, and I'm not quite sure how to put this forward, is would it be reasonable to set some timeline beyond which, we're not going to hear them? Like if they said, yeah, we're available in 5 weeks.
Well, I think that the understanding is that everyone sees the wish to move forward with this. Staff, or Lucas is here, he has been told by the CAO that he'll be in contact with Jewel tomorrow, so I would propose that we would have an answer at least by tomorrow or the next day from Jewel saying at least when they plan on being here. I would most likely presume it will be this month, my goodness.
Well, staff will contact Jewel tomorrow. However, we got the email saying that he will be away prior to our office.
But understandably, there are other people there, and someone will have to make a commitment to say they're either gonna be here or they're not.
I anticipate 2 weeks.
Right. Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly the email we received indicates a pretty good reason why someone can't show. I mean,
Right.
And the gentleman's father passed away, so as long as we can have a reasonable timeline by which someone from Jewel will come and help make sense of, or not, as the case may be, of the proposal. The only thing I would point out is that in response to Councillor Martinello's question, the email we received from the clerk's office quotes the proponent, saying that they trust that the content of their proposal and their experience and references will suffice for the consideration of the board of this assignment. I think it's pretty clear council's not satisfied with that, and we will need to hear
And
from
that
them.
is why I use the language that they will let us know whether they will or will not.
Very well.
They may stand on that and leave it at that. So then the decision will be made. So, anything further on that then? So the motion again, I'll just read it one more time, then we'll, moved by Councillor Ostrander, second by Councillor Baker. Council receive this report as information regarding the storm water master plan award. Go ahead.
I read Mr. Fleming's legal opinion and all, but I go back to the RFP, and it's a pretty plain English kind of statement here that says all proponents are aware that their proposals are deemed public records and may be subject to disclosure upon request. And may is even defined, and it says may is permissive. So the fact that this consultant doesn't seem willing to release parts of this proposal to the public, and in light of what was said here.
Let's get them here and ask them. I mean, okay, all I can say is, the rest of council are more than welcome to do whatever they like. I have a letter here from the municipal solicitor cautioning us on doing that. If somebody wants to go through the freedom of information, that's fine. Let's get the people here and ask them those very pointed questions and say, what's the problem? Failing an answer, then we move
Okay.
forward. So, seeing nothing further on that, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 10, which is the council direction follow-up list. And we'll look to council for any comments. Councillor Ostrander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so you're aware, it's going to be about Lakeside Landing.
Here we are. Roger? You can come there or stay here, whatever you want. Okay. So I'm recusing myself.
If I may, Deputy Mayor?
Go ahead, Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Members of council received from the Deputy Clerk's office on January 16th information that the OMB had ruled on their cost apportionment. And in that ruling, they note that the appellants, I keep putting the wrong pronunciation on the wrong syllable there. The appellants would not be asked to pay anything, that in fact there was no vexatious, et cetera, cause in bringing their suit. So has the municipality moved forward at all with regard to the developer requesting payment of the costs of this OMB appeal?
I'm going to take that as. Go ahead. Deputy Mayor, I'll answer the question.
Would you mind repeating it, please? I was in the middle of signing a document.
I'm happy to repeat my question. My question through you to the CAO is, has the municipality moved forward requesting cost payments on this appeal from the developer?
CEO Watson, can you answer that question, please?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As you know, we've sent one letter and then a second letter from the solicitor to the developer. I've asked a couple of questions regarding that ruling to the lawyer and how to proceed, and I've not yet heard back. So once I do, I'll let council know.
Thanks. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So if we may, just for the record, do we have the dates of those letters handy, when they were sent?
Not handy. I think the last one was about 3 weeks ago.
Thank you.
Councillor Martinello.
And I don't know how I can do this, but the first letter we sent out came from staff, and it went to Mayor, I don't know how it was addressed, but to the owner of 952-849 Ontario Limited. And it was made public immediately, basically. So I moved up whatever letter has been sent from the lawyer as was directed by council, say a month or so ago, that whatever letter has been, subsequent letter has been sent from our legal counsel to whoever it was sent to, be made public, as was the first letter we sent.
Any comment on that particular motion? Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think there's a bit of a difference between the letters being sent by the municipality and sent by our legal representative. I understand the sensitive nature of this and the willingness of all of us to get the taxpayers' money back, but I would recommend a little bit of caution on this.
I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, I talked about this with Mrs. Woodyfield, and the bill has already been paid, as far as I know. And she can confirm this, but you can't get blood from a stone, so, Councillor Martineau.
Well, I'll speak to that. Number one, I think I'll ask C.L. Watson, because I don't agree with what you say, and maybe I don't understand what you asked. So my understanding is, in terms of cost for professional services, that the taxpayers of Brighton spent about $51,000 on that Lakeside Landing OMB appeal. Has any of that money been recovered from Mayor Wallace? Or the developer?
As far as I know, no one's advised me of that. They advised me of the appellants are not liable. The principal of the numbered company is not named on the OMB suit, so he isn't liable. So that leaves the municipality to pay the bill, and they have. As far as
I wonder if the CAO has a little more information you could fill in on that question, though, Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Watson, can you expand on that any?
I will do my best, Deputy Mayor. So yes, the municipality incurred costs in the ballpark of what Councillor Martineau was describing in defending its bylaw to the OMB. We have subsequently asked to be reimbursed, and we have not been reimbursed. So in terms of the Deputy Mayor's indication that the bills have been paid, yes, they have been paid by the municipality for the representation at the OMB. Have we recovered any of that money from any of the parties? No, we have not.
Councillor Martineau.
I'd like to speak to what Councillor Baker said about, confidentiality, sensitivity of different issues written by lawyers and all. In this very agenda, we have a lawyer's opinion that we didn't have to bring out close or anything like that. We have frequently agreed on the bringing it to open from close of various lawyers' opinions. The fact that we at the same time that we put out the letter, the first letter, that we made it open to the public, and the public says to me that there should be no reason we shouldn't make any letter related to this issue. We shouldn't make it available to the public. So again, my motion stands. I don't know if there's a seconder, but
I can only say that the only option available to you, as I see it, is for you to ask the council for a ruling on that. If they agree.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Go
ahead.
I think that's what I just did.
Okay.
I'll second the motion to put it on the board.
Okay. So, would you kindly read the motion again?
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't read. I'll.
I have a question.
Okay.
Let any letters sent regarding the OMB costs in Lakeside Landing from a lawyer?
No. How about this? The most recent letter sent from Municipalities Legal Counsel to the owner of 95249 Ontario will be made available to the public. I'm looking for the one letter.
By what means? I'm looking to avoid a lawsuit. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, I'm looking to abide by section 224 of the Municipal Act, which says that we are obliged to be accountable and transparent. If we can let the first letter go and make it public, then I think we can make the second letter, let the second letter go and make it public.
Deputy Mayor?
Well, I don't have a lawyer in my pocket, so I'd like to get a ruling on it first. CEO?
Now, if I might, perhaps we could make that motion to say that, we will seek, I'm concerned that it may be a part of client-lawyer privilege. So let's ask the lawyer if that indeed is the case, and if he says, no, it's not, then we'll make it public. It's a phone call.
Councilor Martinello?
And to speak to Sarah Watson, is number one, there will be solicitor-client privilege in the letter we got from Swan Cunningham related to. Why not?
If I may.
Go ahead, sir.
It was meant to be an opinion to counsel, and I asked him that question specifically because counsel is the client, and therefore this is between our lawyer and another person's lawyer, and there may be client privilege on the other end. So I don't think it does any harm to ask the question.
Councilor Ostrander?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I agree there's no harm in asking the question, but Councilor Martinello is effectively right. Anytime we correspond or a solicitor corresponds with us, solicitor-client privilege is invoked, and it's up to us as the client to decide whether or not we want to waive that privilege and make things public, including in this case. But I'm happy to have the solicitor tell us that, as long as the solicitor is aware that there are members of council who will want to make the letter public.
I think that's a good idea.
And my assumption is that the lawyer is going to agree with you.
Councilor Baker?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I don't think it's any secret that the municipality and the will of this council is to seek restitution of that money from the developer named. I don't think any of us, or majority of us, have changed our mind on that. I'm simply exercising caution. We've incurred enough legal bills regarding this matter, and I don't want to see us incur another 10 grand or something. And very quickly or very soon, we're going to have to make a decision as to whether we go to the next step regarding this matter. And maybe that question could be asked while you're asking.
I agree, and can we have a motion to that effect?
I'll read what I've got. The council directs that any letters sent regarding OMB costs in Lakeside Landing recently sent by legal counsel be made public after receiving a legal opinion on solicitor-client privilege.
Or on release of such letter. Oh, okay, I don't care, yeah, whatever.
Are you okay with that, CEO?
It's not this motion.
It's not to me, but I think I get it.
Council, I'll call the vote now.
Can we record a vote?
Absolutely.
You know, I really haven't missed these.
Yeah, but you paid well.
I'll begin with Councilor Martinello,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McMurray,
Yes.
Councilor Ostrander,
Yes, but we've missed you.
Councilor Chapman,
Yes, and you aren't paid enough.
Councilor Bink,
Yes.
Councilor Baker,
Yes. And Deputy Mayor, if I may, and
I
this
believe the
would,
motion's carried.
that's right.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask how this will be brought forward. Would it come as correspondence if it is released in the next agenda?
I had no idea the process whereby letters fly back and forth. To be very honest, the administrative, the clerk, Vicky Cannon can probably answer that question.
Unfinished business. Unfinished business. Would that be at the next planning or the next council meeting?
At the next council meeting.
Perhaps, Deputy Mayor, you could ask if council has any other questions about any of the other issues that the mayor's development company may be dealing with, and if not, we can move on.
Isn't this complicated enough? Does anybody have any questions on anything else regarding this matter before we call the mayor back in? No.
No.
What would you call it?
Anything further on the follow-up list? Councilor Ostrander?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at 2016-476, which is direction regarding stormwater fees, specific fees that impact stormwater. I'm curious, Mr. Mayor, through you, if that concept was included in the RFP or either of the proposals that came back.
Comments?
Yes, that is part of the RFP proposal.
Anyone else? Ms. Marnell?
I just see that the resolution from May 15th, 2017 for the development of the, you know what? I'm on the wrong page here. It's about resolution 2017-325, May 15th, 2017. We were told recently that we would have something by the end of January. This is related to the flood response plan. We're now at the first council meeting of February. Do we have any update on what's going on? It was going to go to the emergency planning committee meeting and blah, 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 blah.
So, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it went through the committee, the changes were made, and unfortunately, it never made it to the clerk's office in time to be at this meeting, so it will be absolutely definitely at the next council meeting.
Anything else? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I did a little research on that particular point, and I found a nice sandbagging machine for only $6,000, $6,625. So I'll pass that on to staff just in case they want to incorporate it in the stormwater plan.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so the motion I have is moved by Councilor Ostrander, seconded by Councilor Tappan. Councilor C, the council direction follow-up list of information as presented. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, so the original 11.1 had been moved. We're on to notices of motions, and the one that has been added again is the council direct staff to excavate all campus grass and clean out discharge area at the Harbor Point Pond. Any further comments? Go ahead.
The reason I include this is because in December, according to the residents that staff spoke with, staff indicated that this was an issue that would be dealt with and that they needed the hard ground to deal with this issue. I think we all have a pretty good idea that stormwater management pond may not be working as efficiently as possible. There's a large area of pampas grass. When you walk down near the discharge structure, the concrete box with the orifices and all that, it does look clogged. Not clogged, but that there is debris at the influent to the discharge structure. The Insurance Bureau of Canada says that flooding is now the number one cause of insurance claims. There's all kinds of information about the effect that climate change is having on more erratic and drastic weather patterns. We ourselves see it with what happens in these past 2 or 3 weeks, where we go from -20 to +7 and we have rain. I think we should be doing everything we can to make sure that the stormwater drainage system in this municipality works do as much as we can in the lowest tech possible way, and this is a pretty low-tech way of making sure that that stormwater detention pond, which drains a very large area, is working as best it can.
Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. At the beginning of the meeting, the councillor indicated that there was a commitment made on the part of staff to the residents, and that commitment wasn't met. I'd like to get some feedback from staff if that in fact is the case, and if so, why it didn't happen.
Turn it over to the CEO.
I suppose there was a discussion that went on regarding that pond. There's been probably 12 or 15 of them over the last little while. And during that time, we've had various people go down and review it, including representatives of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. I'm not certain that going down there and excavating the outlet of that pond is necessarily required. It's a stormwater quality pond, and having grass around the outlet sometimes is a benefit. In our review, because it's been raised so many times, we have had concerns about whether or not the water was able to get out of that site, and there was any risk of flooding of the neighboring homes. And we have, in no uncertain terms, a comment from our peer review engineer that indicated that he has reviewed the outlet channel that's meant to overflow and prevent flooding, and he specifically made comments on that, indicating that he felt it was intact and there was no risk to the neighboring municipalities. We're about to embark on the stormwater plan, and it's going to give us advice on how to deal with these things. I'm not sure that going in there and excavating and making a really big mess is necessarily in the long-term interest of that pond, especially knowing that we're going to be re-excavating that pond in relation to the next part of development, and that'll be at no cost to the municipality. So I'm not sure what the commitment was made and whether or not that is a legitimate thing to do. And we have sought advice, and I'm feeling very confident that that based on the information that I've got from both the Ministry of Environment Climate Change representative and the engineer who went down there, those homes are not at risk of flooding. I don't know what else I could say.
Mr. Ostrander, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, it's Toby that we will be requiring to expand and excavate that stormwater management pond, is that correct?
That is correct.
And when do we anticipate that will be?
So they're still making progress with the next. So it was 2 phases, and Mr. Ashton can probably answer a little bit more than I can, but there were 2 phases to the next development. Obviously, the first one is completion of Raglan Street and the other street, and that was phase 1, and they have approval for that now through the Conservation Authority, and they're continuing to work on the next phase, which will be phase 2. Is that correct, Mr. Ashton?
Yeah, they have received MLECC approval for the sewers and stuff for phase 1B, and then we're waiting for the updated copy of the stormwater plan for the rest of their development, which will include phase 2.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, Mayor. So if I may, there seems to be a lot of this discussion seems to be around the reeds in front of the catch basin. For argument's sake, what would it entail, or what would it require the staff to do to clear those reeds in front of the catch basin? Would it be, how big of a deal, I guess, would it be if the staff were to entertain that in front of the catch basin?
I think the only concern I have, there's no sides here. Everybody wants the right things to be done for the people that are because comfortable and confident in all these sorts of things. However, we appear to be hearing information from staff. Staff are comfortable with the way that the pond is operating, having an orifice on the side as well as on the top. So if it were to come to a certain level, and if there was something blocking there, it can enter in from the top. But for whatever reason, and I say it respectfully, that residents and some members of council do not seem to be satisfied with the explanations offered by our staff. So I think, again, we heard a discussion of budget the other night about how and when we were going to get in there and do some things around that, as you're explaining, perhaps just that area. There were some assurances by staff that the grass and that area would be cleared out, and I guess the motion this evening was trying to put a drop dead date on that. Go ahead.
I think I can answer part of your question. Is that what the motion on the floor today is to excavate? And I don't think that's a wise thing to do. I think what happens is that grass is seasonal, it grows and it dies, and it can be a lot of debris in the spring. And so staff can go in there and clean it up, take a lot of the deadfall, cut it back a little bit, but retain the bulk of it there. And I think that's something that we can do between now and spring floods that will make sure that the water flows well, but doesn't go in and create havoc in there by totally excavating the field there.
Go ahead for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mayor. So that's what I'm looking for. Obviously, whether the residents' concerns are valid or not, those concerns are not going to go away. So what I'm proposing is what's the minimum we can do to try to help alleviate those concerns without going in and doing a whole revamp of the pond? Can we do something, anything, to alleviate those concerns?
And again, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but again, the other thing it brings to mind also is how close as a council are we now getting into operations? I mean, we're hearing from staff again and again, as you're saying, and I'm respecting the comments that are coming forward from the two residents that are there, that are around the pond. They seem to be representing the folks in the area, and we do have an obligation to go out and to satisfy their concerns and make sure that, of course, nobody floods and there is no sort of damage to their personal property. But I keep coming back, we're getting assurances from staff, even this evening, that is not going to happen. So, Councilor Osborne, you got a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. So the reason I seconded this, even though I do try to steer away from operational issues, was entirely around my confusion from Mr. Sparham's answer at the budget meeting, where when asked about this very specific issue, said yes and no at the same time, and sooner and maybe never when asked when. So when Councilor Martinello said, would you second this, I said, yeah, at least have the discussion to find out, is it yes or no, and is it sooner or later? So if the answer is yes, we're going to clean up that pond and get rid of some of the dead vegetation and help the flow move better in the spring during what we hope is not, but anticipate might be a flooding season. I'm happy to hear that. I guess I want to know when.
Go ahead, say that.
As I mentioned, I would suggest that we do that it'd be hard to do when it's full of snow, but sometime between now and the spring floods, they can get in there and pull out the dead, tidy it up, clean up, to make sure it's flowing and make sure it's not going to be clogged.
Go ahead.
The motion that we moved in second, in fact said the 15th of April 2018, which is about the time that Mr. Watson speaks to, so I think I can take that into account. And in the discussions that I've had with Mrs. Langevin and Mrs. Richardson, Mr. Sparham did make it clear that they needed the hard ground, or he needed the hard ground in order to move heavy equipment in order to do the excavation. About our peer reviewer, being confident that everything's all right there at the stormwater management pond. At the November 14th meeting, I asked him when were the soundings taken, that is the depth of the stormwater management pond, and he said, well, 2 or 3 years ago it was done by Van Meter. I wrote some follow-on emails asking what is the depth of the pond, because in my view the depth of the pond is central to the efficiency and the workability of the pond. The first email I sent him was November 20th. It's about 3 months now. I still don't have an answer.
So back to our motion. It is suggesting some cleanup work.
Could you reread the motion, please?
Well, again, and that's, you want to bring that comment forward?
My question, I guess, is do we need a motion of council to tell us how to operate?
Councilor Martinello?
My response is yes, is because it seems that staff made a commitment, and we're told we should trust the expertise of staff. And I do trust what Langevin and Richardson say. They made a commitment, staff made a commitment to get this done, and then for reasons that became very hazy, whether it was about timing or lack of funds or whatever, the staff backed down. The residents were told that they would make arrangements, they would notify the local residents that they had to move certain stuff so that the heavy equipment could be moved across the access ways. That the frozen ground was needed to move the heavy equipment and operate the heavy equipment, and that makes sense. And then it will be done. So, yeah, I understand we shouldn't have to do this. I do. And I think that's a problem.
Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. So, with all due respect to the councillor, I would ask that the mover and the seconder withdraw this motion. We have a commitment on camera by the CAO that this is gonna happen. So I expect it to happen. The gallery here has heard that commitment. The residents that are watching have heard that commitment. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's good as a motion, so I'd like to see it happen. If it doesn't, then we'll deal with it at that time.
Gentlemen, I'll put forward. Go ahead.
I'd be happy to remove any comments around excavation for now, if that would be okay with the mover, and just have it refer to the office grass or whatever it is in terms of cleanup. But I think the motion is important so that we can at least see it on the council direction follow-up list. To keep track.
Councillor Vink, go ahead.
I'm content from this conversation to allow staff to do what they said that they're going to do and can visit at a later date.
Anyone else, any other comments? Councillor Chapman?
Yes, I agree with the Councillor Baker and Councillor Vink. The commitment's there, and if something doesn't happen, then we move on it.
I mean, we do have our CAO right here, right now, on audio, part of our minutes. But, and again, CAO, you have no issue with what's, you understand the request this evening and what the expectation is?
I think so.
I don't know, I would still like the motion to stand, and I would agree to removing any commentary about excavation. I don't know if we can just do that by striking out if Councilor Ostrander agrees.
I agree. And Mayor, if I may, I'll reiterate, I want it on the council direction follow-up list. There's been enough confusion around this issue, especially when we hear in a public meeting, committee of the whole meeting, very specific confusion from the staff member who would be responsible. So it's important, I think, for council and the public to have this on the follow-up list.
So the motion then reads that the council directs staff to clear out the pampas grass and the discharge structure. That removes the excavating piece. Discharge structure at the outlet and on further.
That this email be part of the motion, that the attached email be part of the motion, something like that.
This work be by April 15th. Okay, so that's the new motion. The excavation portion has been taken out. So we have a motion on the floor. We'll deal with the motion then. Go ahead.
Can we vote, please?
I'll begin the recorded vote with Councillor Martinello,
Yes.
Councillor, or Deputy Mayor McMurray,
Yes.
Councillor Ostrander,
Yes.
Councillor Chapman,
Yes, only to get it on the follow-up list.
Councillor Vink,
No.
Councillor Baker,
No.
Mayor Wallace.
No.
Motion is carried.
So we're on to 11.2, which is now a motion. Moved by Councillor Martinello, second by Councillor Ostrander, whereas the Insurance Bureau of Canada states that climate change is causing severe weather event, storm, flooding, floods to happen more frequently with greater intensity, whereas water damage is now the most common cause of home insurance claims, and whereas Brighton residential areas south of the tracks is a very highly developed, low-lying and end-of-drainage and flood-prone area, and whereas in order to protect Brighton taxpayers' lives and homes from the danger of flooding, now therefore, council direct Lower Trent Conservation Authority develops a plan and marks up all removable fallen trees and other obstructions. For the removal of fallen trees and other obstructions from the section of Butler Creek South Highway 2. Further, the council direct the LTC have this plan completed no later than April 30th, 2018. If there's anything further needs to be said, go ahead.
I understand, I talked to Councilor Strainer about the use of the word direct. I base it on the fact that we pay the Lower Trent Conservation Authority, give or take $160,000 a year. I understand that they do provide services, but I see ourselves as a customer. I think that I watch Butler Creek quite closely. It very frequently, even after rainfall events have happened, it is very near the bottom of the bridge on Cedar Street. I know there's a lot of deadfall in that, and I'm not looking for the Lower Trent to remove it. I'm just looking for them to mark those that we can remove. I don't want to affect fish habitat or other kinds of habitat. But I do want it to the fullest extent possible, make sure that Butler Creek flows as good as it can in order to reduce the chance of flooding.
I would be able to support the motion if 2 times the word direct was used, the word request was put in, because the problem is if we say direct and they say no, what do you do? So Baker, you have a comment, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm assuming, based on what's been said here, that it's part of their mandate, and all of the creeks within the municipality are under their mandate. How often do they peruse, or do they have a look at these creeks? Do we know?
I'm not aware how often they actually, we have 2 members here that can speak, but I know we did have.
Once a year, once every 5 years?
Go ahead.
I can speak to that. This is something I've been pushing since approximately the first day I was on first council. So it's been going on for about 7 years at least, and it just hasn't happened. And
No, the question is how often does Lower Trent?
it hasn't, as far as I know, it hasn't happened.
So they don't, as representatives, they don't have an ongoing plan where they go around and monitor creeks?
No, I've pushed this even as a board member at Lower Trent, and it's basically gone nowhere. So I'm trying to push it from below here, and I would agree, if you would support that, to change directly to request.
Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Mayor. I've only seen flood here twice. One was at Coles Lumber when the ice jammed the culvert under the tracks, and the Coles Lumber was floating around in the floodwaters. The second was on the English Settlement Road, and once again, it was from ice breakup, jamming the culvert. And the trees and debris in the water are part of the ecosystem. And I think we would have to get Fisheries and Oceans in here to give it their blessing before we started dredging the creek bottom of logs and assorted things that provide habitat for spawning brookies and rainbow trout.
But again, if I can, just the whole point of the exercise then is based on what the motion is saying, is requesting Lower Trent come forward with information for this council to explain whether or not these things can take place, and that is why I will support it with the word request in there. Okay, Councilor Baker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So have the municipality received any complaints about the water level in Butler Creek in the recent past? And if so, how do we respond to them?
CAO, go ahead.
Your worship, not recently, since the flooding, obviously.
So that begs the second part of my question. If we were to receive a complaint, how does the municipality respond? Do we send a staff member out? Do we call Lower Trent? How do we respond to them?
What happened with?
So depending on what it was, there's been a couple of occasions where something's happened where it's clearly blocking water, and if it's close to where we can see it, we've gone in and cleaned it up so that we could, it wasn't affecting infrastructure. If it was something more widespread, because in that area, what would happen, it tends to just spread the water all around and floods a fairly wide area. But I think the point may be a good one insofar as asking them to take a look at it to see if there's anything there that would seriously inhibit flow. And if that was the case, then they could come back to us and make some suggestions. It wouldn't necessarily mean disrupting all the fish habitat and the other habitat, but sort of leave it up to their judgment, I suppose.
We went through this exercise in the last term of council, and they came earmarked very, very few areas that could be removed because the others were fish habitat areas, so they had to be left. so that there was some very preliminary work done, because we had an opportunity to walk the area, the Toby Link area, actually, which was identified. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 points. First, I'm okay with, as second, removing the word, changing the word directs to requests in the 2 situations. But I would point out Butler Creek did overflow its bank in January during the thaw. About 20 minutes after Lower Trent issued a potential flood warning or advisory, I can't remember what word they used, but whatever their yellow code is on their map, they issued it, and then a resident from south of Brighton posted on one of the social media sites about the creek overflowing its bank and pictures showing it. So it has happened, and if we get any significant melt on and off, it will again.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to point out to Deputy Mayor McMurray, I truly am not looking at excavate. It is about marking trees and then picking them out as gently as you can. So, and Lower Trent would act as DFO, or on behalf of a DFO, about the flooding of the creek. It very frequently, in heavy rain events, and I see Councillor Tavin shaking her head, I do watch it at Cedar Street, and I can tell you very often, in the past month, it has been about that far below the bottom of the Cedar Street Bridge. And again, there's every indication that rainfalls are gonna get more, they're gonna get heavier, they're gonna get more frequent. We've got a lot of snow on the ground, a lot of ice in the creek. I think we should be doing everything we can to make sure flooding is prevented. Full
Okay,
as possible.
I think we beat this to death. We basically are putting a request forward to Lower Trent, to bring forward hopefully to develop a plan, and they'll bring that information back to council. So, failing reading the whole thing all over again, basically all in favor?
Can we
That's carried.
vote, please?
I'll begin the recorded vote with Councillor Martinello,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McMurray,
Yes.
Councillor Ostrander,
Yes.
Councillor Chapman,
Yes.
Councillor Vink,
Yes.
Councillor Baker,
Yes.
Mayor Wallace.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Okay, so on to 11.3, which is just a notice of motion this evening, moved by Councillor Martinello, second by Councillor Ostrander. Council directs staff to amend the procedure bylaw so that it is clear that the only vote that requires a 2/3 majority support of council is a vote on a motion of reconsideration. So we'll move on to item 12, which is unfinished business. We have the letter here that I believe has been discussed at some points. You know, are there any other comments you want to make regarding the letter for us?
Mr. Mayor, no, I wanted to address, the request that was made previously. You need to realize that this is not our, position of staff necessarily. We're simply making sure that we don't misstep based on the request of the proponent.
Good, thank you. So we'll move on to our bylaws, unless there's any questions about that legal letter. Seeing none, we'll move on to our bylaws. And the first one I have under that is, has been moved by Councillor Martinello, second by Councillor Ostrander. Council gives bylaws first, second, third reading, finally pass this date, being bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement between the Corporation Municipality of Brighton, Jeffrey G. Wallens Construction Limited, the Brighton Administration Building and Library renovation of 35 Palace Street. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. All right. Yes?
Oh, yeah, that's there.
So the original 113.2 for the integrity commissioner course is deferred. The one that was added in at the beginning of the meeting, moved by Councillor Martinello, second by Councillor Tadman, Council gives a bylaw. First, second, third reading, and passed on this date, being bylaw to authorize the appointments of Councilor Alan Tadman on behalf of the municipality pursuant to the Conservation Authorities Act. All in favor? Carried. Okay, move on to, reports from our advisory committee, moved by Councilor Martinello, second by Councilor Ostrander, that council approve the minutes of the Save Our Heritage Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. December 14, 2017, as presented. All in favor? Is there a question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm just curious about the reserve fund. We provide taxpayers' funds to this group every year, and it's commendable that they have such a large reserve fund, but I'm just curious whether that was accumulated via the taxpayer and whether anybody could comment on that.
Councilor Bink, go ahead.
They put money in and out of the reserve fund and only keep a certain amount in their bank account because it collects interest, the reserve fund. So it's just going in and out as needed. It's not this huge reserve that they're carrying forward every year. It's just how they operate, rather than keeping all the money in an operating bank account. Does that make sense? No? Why not? No, what about it doesn't?
Well, you're sure, I understand about moving money around and all that. Do they have 69 grand or do they not have 69?
Well, yes, but that's to take care of their operating for the year. Like they make money when they have their shows, right? At the barn theater. So they put it in reserve and pull from it as they need to pay the bills. Does that not make sense?
Obviously it does. My question was only, do they have a reserve fund of 69,000?
Yes.
I understand they use
At
it for
this point in
operating.
time.
At this point in time, I understand bank accounts change all the time. Just curious, what does it cost to operate that association for the year?
I don't have a budget in front of me, but I believe we had that in our package, but I can get the information.
No, I can go back to it. Thank you.
Under the grants, you'll also note that the request was for 10,000, 9 of which goes to operating, 1 that goes into a reserve. Although the property is owned by Lower Trent, the house is owned by Lower Trent, the operating and the maintenance of the building is all paid out of that. And I just made a couple of small changes to the motion, and I'll read it again. It says approve. It's the Save Our Heritage organization, it's SOHO. So what was here on what we have is an advisory committee. It's not a committee of council. So therefore, we're only receiving the minutes of this group. So the motion now reads, the council received the minutes of the Save Our Heritage organization December 14, 2017 as presented. Okay, any further? All in favor? That's carried. So we'll now move on to item 16.1, moved by Councilor Ostrander, second by Councilor Baker. The council received the correspondence from Brian Patterson, Too Far, Too Fast, regarding the request for council to pass a motion to prevent the opening of legalized cannabis stores in the community. Any comment needed there? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 16.2, moved by Councilor Martinello, second by Councilor Ostrander, that council proclaims May 10, 11, 12 of 2018 as Carnation Days in the municipalities of Brighton. All in favor? That's carried. So under our FYI correspondence, we have, I believe this has been brought forward before just for our consideration. 17.1, moved by our Deputy Mayor, second by Councilor Tadman. The council received the notice of meeting from the municipality of Trent Hills to consider the enlargement of Lower Trent Region Conservation Authority jurisdiction as information. Any comment coming out of that? Pretty straightforward. All in favor? Yeah, go ahead, CA.
Perhaps you could send this back to the Conservation Authority. Will this change make any difference to our allotment of fees?
Go ahead.
No, it's either in this particular notice or the package that was sent before, but it doesn't affect any of them. Should it? Not for us.
Can you
It
just,
might lower us, bigger areas.
wait, can you take that back maybe and get some?
We can
confirmation
ask.
for us? Thank you.
I understand the question, the more people, I understand.
Bigger
Portion by
area.
area, is it not?
Area of people, I'm not quite sure, but yeah.
So we have, one of the two members will get some clarification from council on that. Thank you very much. Seeing nothing further, all in favor? It's carried. And now we'll move to our question period. Any members of the audience wishing to come forward to state your name and ask a question about something on our agenda this evening?
Evening, Your Worship, Council. My name is Brenda Richardson, 104 Raglan Street. I do have a question, but it's got to take a little bit of information first, and I hope you just bear with me. It's in regards to the pond and the maintenance. First, I'd like to clear something up. We did not request Mr. Sparham to come. He offered, and Gord Fletcher was with him and said that he said we could take at least 2 truckloads of sediment out of the front of that catch basin. You're required by MOECC rules of regulations to be maintaining these ponds, not just Harbour Point, but Brighton by the Bay. Some of you may recall, due to lack of maintenance back in 2010, MOECC ordered the town to look after that pond. Now, Mr. Watson, no disrespect, you have gone over and over, repeated to us that we're not spending any money that because Toby Developments are going to be enlarging that pond. Waiting for a stormwater management plan and doing all this has been taking almost 2 years. I have a letter here addressed to Mr. Ashton September 25th, and it was referred to in the pre-service agreement. It was a letter in October that referred to this letter in September. It is 4 pages long, 19 points of why their stormwater management plan was not accepted. Some of them go back as far as May 2016, not addressed yet, not addressed yet, not addressed yet, not addressed yet. 19 points, 4 pages long. None of this has been done yet. They refer to their peak flows, how they're wrong, their drawings, that they should be revising their drawings, their model systems, their flows generation, everything is like, it's all in here. I have no faith in this development company, and I'm not afraid to say this publicly, that they will have it together to have this pond enlarged. As you all know, we are not opposed, never have been opposed to having this pond enlarged. We want it looked after, and it should be looked after in line with the MOECC guidelines. I don't want to see us getting fined. Do you? Do you want the same action that happened in 2010? Now, my question is, if this pond is not enlarged in the year, by say August 2018, does council intend to follow the MOECC guidelines and start looking after our ponds? They have not been flushed. Yes, there's a lot of junk there, and there's ice coming up to the orifice, which is going to plug up as well. There's a lot of crap in there, and this town is responsible for that, and telling somebody else to foot the bill because they're going to be doing a development. Who knows who's going to have the money to do this? Like I said, 2016 is when their stormwater management plan was first addressed and still rejected again in September. Mr. Ashton has told me that according to the Planning Act, so I know that I'm assuming that the stormwater management plan has not been finalized, because Mr. Ashton said that there will be a public meeting, which nobody has been informed of yet. So I really think that asking to have the pampas grass looked after that's growing in our yards, and to have the pond maintained is not beyond what we should be expecting as taxpayers, and your duty as council and town to follow the law by looking after these ponds. Thank you.
Can I just ask you who
Yes.
authored the letter?
Pardon me?
The letter you referred to?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's from Lower Trent Conservation.
It's Lower Trent.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate your question. Anyone else? up here if you like. And just please introduce yourself, Mike.
Yeah, my name is Rick Lalone, and I live on, well, actually, I'll tell you where I live. I live about half a kilometer north of this image, the area represented by this image. With respect to stormwater, I understand that, you know, stormwater represents surface water. But there's another kind of water, and that's groundwater. So, in the area which I live, I've already defined the general area. That would be around Ontario Street. So the point is I'm sure I live. The street on which I live is about 6 or 2 meters higher than this water level here in Lake Ontario. But my basement is also about 2 meters deep. And in my basement, there's a hole in the floor. And that hole is to house a sump pump. And then the sump pump pumps groundwater. So the point I'm trying to make here is the groundwater is affected by, well, it's not really, in all of the 17 years that I've lived here, I've never come to the conclusion that the surface level of the lake represents the groundwater level. That's not my point at all. But while I was discussing this with the neighbor pointed out to me that the surface or the water level of the lake prevents the drainage of the groundwater into the lake. So obviously if the lake water increases, or the level of the lake water increases, but we can't get rid of groundwater, or nature can't get rid of groundwater. So then that comes up into the sump, and now residents have got to deal with this groundwater. So this is the point that I'm trying to make, because in all of the stormwater management plans, you're dealing with surface water. But there's another layer to this. And with respect to groundwater, of course, nobody knows, or nobody has defined what the groundwater level is. There's an assumption that the groundwater everywhere, like everywhere there's groundwater, and the groundwater is at a certain level. Well, in my view, I've looked at all the excavations as they occur over, say, a decade and a half. And it is my feeling that there isn't one level of groundwater, that there are, the whole area, and I'm talking now about a larger area, probably south of the tracks to this area here. The ground is not homogeneous. There's many areas where you just have clay surface and you can readily dig an excavation, but then there's many other areas where there's shale, and digging an excavation requires blasting or dynamiting. As a matter of fact, in my community, there's one whole section of the community was built by mining mining people to place explosive charges in the ground to break up all the shale. So then the foundations could be more readily dug without hiring expensive drills, jackhammer drills. So anyways, I just want to make these points. And when it comes to flooding, my concern is this. I mean, the water flooding, occurs mainly in the basement. It creates damage. The water can come into the basement by one of two ways. It can come in through your basement windows, or it can come in through that sump wall. Especially if you lose electricity during a storm or what have you. It comes in through the 2-foot diameter hole that's been cut into your basement floor. So this is my concern, and I would hope that a stormwater management plan would take into account groundwater, and also this would require then that you have some kind of a geological knowledge of the area that's represented by the area that I'm referring to, and you have some idea as to where the shale is, where the clay is, where the sand is, and so forth. So this is the only point that I'm trying to make.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else coming forward? So our closed session has been deferred, so we break through to item 20. Moved by Councillor Binks, seconded by our Deputy Mayor. Councillors Vilas first, second for the reading and finally passed the state confirmed the proceedings of the council meeting, municipality of Brighton meeting held on February 5th, 2018. All in favor? Is carried. And then finally, moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by our Deputy Mayor, that the February 5th, 2018 council meeting be adjourned at 9:01 p.m. All in favor? It's carried. Meeting stands adjourned.
There's court tomorrow, so if anyone can stay and help. That'd be great.
We can do that.
Look after Mickey.